Hi guys, Daniel here, just doing a quick response to the topic of the week for this week, which is about how the Tomb Kings have been discontinued as an army and what we sort of see for other armies being discontinued and potentially coming back. So the first point I'll make is that I'm pretty disappointed that the Tomb Kings are gone. I think they offered a different playstyle to typical undead armies across sort of all game systems, I suppose. They have a variation of larger units, things like the constructs and war machines. It was a bit different to the typical raise undead and grind your enemy into the ground with shitty units. So both from a gaming perspective and also I quite like the aesthetic. If I was starting the hobby from scratch, Tomb Kings would be one of the top armies that I would consider starting, so I will miss that aesthetic from the game, and I feel sorry for anyone who's sort of halfway through making a Tomb Kings army, because they're going to have to choose to either stop and just keep what they've got now, or sell it and start another army, or potentially even just continue finishing their army with models bought at horrendous eBay prices. So feel sorry for them. And on the topic of them coming back, unfortunately for all the Chemrites out there, I can't see them coming back. This is purely because we've seen other armies that could have been predicted for being completely discontinued simply just be included in another army. So things like the Slayers, which the original models aren't available anymore, but then became their own little faction, or the Beastmen and the various sub factions of Chaos being all included in the Chaos book. So I think, and I also think that Games Workshop have moved to being a bit more open and honest. So the fact that they've come out and said, look, this is a last chance to buy, and the fact that we've seen other potentially culled factions be rolled into combined with other armies, I really think this all points to the fact that the Tomb Kings are gone, and I can't see them repackaging and bringing them out again so soon, or else I think they would just leave them for sale like they've done with, say, the Chaos, where they just really left everything for sale, and then once they came out with the book, they discontinued some, repackaged some, brought out some new models. So unfortunately for the Chemrites, I don't see them coming back. They could potentially, I could be wrong, I wasn't expecting them to completely drop them anyway, but that's just how I see it going. So onto the topic of what other armies could be discontinued. I don't think any more will be. I think if I had some top candidates going into Age of Sigmar for which armies would be discontinued, I would have said the Beastmen, but we've seen them be rolled into Chaos. I would say Bretonnia, but I think they will be combined with the Empire, and certainly they might not be called Bretonnia anymore, but there's a lot of the models from them that could easily come into being part of the Empire, either because they're better models. I think just the Knights in general and the Men-at-Arms are much better models than the Empire Knights and Empire Foot Troops, so I could see them being placed in there and replacing the Empire versions. And also they offer a few unique things like the Trebuchet and the Pegasus Knights, which aren't in the Empire. So I see the Bretonnia, like the Beastmen, being amalgamated. And the other army I could see being discontinued would be the Ogres, merely because they're a bit of a fringe army. I think because they're a reasonably late edition, sort of around the same time as the Tomb Kings, that they've always been a bit of a fringe, even though they did enjoy a lot of popularity when they were very strong for parts of 7th and 8th. Also, the Destruction faction as a whole doesn't have a whole lot of armies in it, so although I didn't see them cutting half of the armies in the undead faction, but I think the ogres will stay even if their numbers get cut down a bit. So I don't see whole armies disappearing, but I do see individual units or large sections of armies disappearing, and perhaps, for instance, the Bretonnia might just become a 3 or 4 unit sub-faction of whatever the Empire becomes, similar to what Kislev used to be. And my prediction for the next lot of models to be discontinued is the greenskins. I think this is because with the release of the Undead Battle Tome, we've now seen 3 of the 4 factions come out with some sort of release, and the only one that's untouched is the Destruction. And I think we've seen a lot more fluff and images of the greenskins than we have of the ogres, which is why I sort of put them at the top of the list of the first of the Destruction factions to be done. Sorry. And the units that I see being discontinued, I think there's a lot of very old and very, very dated units, particularly in the Goblin faction. I think all of everything Wolf Rider related, they're all pretty old and pretty poor models. And same with the older version of the Goblins, the multi-part kits where each arm, each head, and each torso are all completely interchangeable. That makes ranking up a nightmare. I think they're pretty old and pretty dated as well, so I think they'll go. Combining it with the ogres, I think the Noblars will disappear. I don't see any purpose for the Noblars really, when if you're an ogre player you can just include some goblins, so I think they'll disappear, and you'll end up with the Night Goblins being the primary goblin faction. So I see things like the Squig Hoppers and the Night Goblins and the Fanatics and things like that remaining. I also think the orcs will be cut down. I think the basic orc will be discontinued, and we'll be left with the savage orcs and the black orcs, partially again because they're pretty old and dated models, and I think that they'll really want to cut down on how many units there are. So I think they'll keep the distinction of the savage orcs being the simpler minded, I suppose you might say, orc, and then the black orcs being the more elite version. And I think you might see the snotlings disappear. It doesn't seem like they are using swarms a whole lot in their newer stuff, and I think that the snotlings, they kind of filled perhaps a slightly comedic, cheap role in the old army, and I'm not sure whether they really retain a role in there. So summing up, I see all of the older, very dated orcs and goblin stuff being discontinued and not renewed, and then just remaining with some of the more unique, so the black orcs, the savage orcs, and the night goblins, as well as obviously the Noblars being gone from the orcs and from the ogres, sorry. So I might wrap it up there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and till next week, cheers.